CNN International News. This is your host, Melanie Greco. Tonight, we continue our special presentation where we will examine the lives of undocumented workers worldwide. We will pay particular attention to Toronto and New York, two cities which have some of the highest counts of undocumented workers. Joining us tonight is Katie Moranis, Toronto's go-to labor attorney, and joining us from New York City is Robin Silverman, immigration attorney and co-founder of New York Immigration Coalition. Hi Melanie, thanks for having me on the show. Hey, it's great to be here from New York. Now Katie, it's estimated that a whopping 150,000 non-status immigrants are currently working in Toronto. I'm sorry. It seems that we're having some technical difficulties. Our broadcast signal is being intercepted by an IP address in Siberia. Good evening, comrades. I come in peace. My name is Melanie, and this is Katya. We have been following your show, and we have some questions for you. Now, ever since Katya was a little kitten, it has been our dream to come to America. In Siberia, there is only crime and cold. Katya, she needs compassion and capitalism. Katya is getting old, and getting citizenship takes too long. So we were thinking of taking somewhat of a permanent vacation, if you know what I mean. Settling down, maybe getting a job. So I was wondering if illegal workers have any protection under your laws. Illegal immigrants are protected under the 14th Amendment in the United States Constitution, particularly the Equal Protection Clause, which states, "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." But this didn't always apply to illegal aliens. It was in 1886, in the case Yick Wu versus Hopkins, that a judge ruled that this clause applies to any race, color, nationality, and to an alien who has entered the country. How's it there in Toronto, Katie? Well, Robin, comparable to the 14th Amendment is Section 7 of the Charter, which states that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person and the right not to be deprived thereof except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. In the 1985 case Singh versus Minister of Employment and Immigration, the Supreme Court held that the Charter applies to everyone in Canada, including illegal immigrants. Really? That's good to know. So it should be easy to get a job, correct? Not exactly. Since 1986, the Immigration Reform and Control Act required employers to attest to their employees' immigration status and made it illegal to knowingly hire or recruit unauthorized immigrants. Despite this, it's estimated that there's 345,000 undocumented workers in the Big Apple. More than half of all dishwashers in the city are illegal immigrants, as are a third of all sewing machine operators, painters, cooks, construction laborers, and housekeepers. While in Canada, the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act states that employers who knowingly hire workers without proper documentation can face fines of up to $50,000 and 2 years in jail, and workers may be deported. Yet these laws are loosely enforced. Unless employers have been found to routinely hire illegal workers on a wide scale or engage in other unlawful conduct such as human trafficking, they are often not pursued by Canadian Border Services or Immigration Canada. And there's estimated to be around 150,000 undocumented workers in Toronto alone. So, if it's illegal for employers to hire undocumented workers, doesn't that make them vulnerable to exploitation? What about things like minimum wage, discrimination laws, and severance pay? Well, non-status immigrants have no legal right to obtain a work permit or a social insurance number, and thus work in an underground economy for low wages under poor and unsafe work conditions, with no access to workers' compensation or publicly funded health care, making them extremely vulnerable to dismissal, abuse, and exploitation by their employers. Fear of exposure has resulted in avoidance to seek legal protection under the Human Rights Code, the Employment Standards Act, Workplace Safety and Insurance Act, or Occupational Health and Safety Act, which don't necessarily exclude non-status individuals. For instance, the Ontario Employment Standard Act provides workers, irrespective of immigration status, protection over receiving full payment for what the worker has earned. Under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, workers are able to file anonymous complaints regarding unsafe work conditions. The truth is that many undocumented workers create jobs, pay taxes, contribute to insurance funds and pension plans through false social insurance numbers and can never access these services. Well, New York labor laws apply to undocumented workers too, so it's illegal for employers to pay below minimum wage. The Equal Protection Employment Opportunity Commission makes it clear that their anti-discrimination laws applies to all employees regardless of their work status. And it doesn't stop there. Age Discrimination in Employment Act protects workers 40 and older. Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities. Equal Pay Act states that undocumented workers are entitled to the same back pay and reinstatement if the employee was unlawfully terminated. Civil Rights Act 1964 prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. But attitudes toward undocumented workers are clearly changing in the judicial system, but it's important to recognize that when it comes to labor courts, no two cases are the same, because judges often interpret the applicability of these laws very differently. Well, if it's illegal to hire undocumented workers, then what good would it do to protect them on the job? Well, if employers were not held responsible for discrimination against unauthorized workers, it would create an incentive for unscrupulous employers to engage in unlawful workplace conduct. This would directly undermine the enforcement of immigration laws by encouraging the employment of unauthorized workers. I see what you mean. Well, can't employers just threaten their employees with retaliation if they complain about the abuse? The truth is that this kind of stuff happens every day. Unfortunately, employees are simply unaware of their rights and live in the shadows. The Supreme Court held that employee wrongdoings do not shield a discriminating employer from liability under the civil rights laws. And employers or prosecutors who threaten to report undocumented workers can be held liable for civil advantage, which is considered unethical. Abuse or discrimination by an employee and the illegal status of the worker are seen as separate issues. The same principle applies to Toronto laws. So what's the future of illegal immigrants looking like in Toronto and New York? The future is looking bright because Toronto was declared Canada's first sanctuary city for illegal immigrants. This so-called Access Without Fear motion outlines a formal policy allowing undocumented migrants access to city services such as food banks and homeless shelters, and naturally some are highly opposed to the new bill, arguing that it sends a message to the world that it's okay to break Canadian law. Well, in July of this year, New York made headlines for becoming the nation's first municipality to spend millions of taxpayer dollars to help illegal immigrants get jobs and learn English. Under the plan, the city will become $18 million in a special program aimed at helping illegal aliens find work and get driver's licenses. City officials have named it the Immigration Relief Program, and it will include adult education classes and legal services, among other benefits. It is expected to help tens of thousands of illegal immigrants living in New York. Well, what effect will these new policies have for the stakeholders? Well, undocumented workers affect every facet of society. If non-status workers get greater legal protection, employers are less likely to take advantage of them. If governments invest more in undocumented workers, as the trend seems to be, the money comes out of the pockets of legal citizens. And this may seem unfair to those who are in the country legally, but governments realize that undocumented workers make up a quite a large portion of the labor force and also contribute to tax dollars as well. And the problem doesn't seem to be
going away, so simply deporting everyone would cause the economies of New York and Toronto to suffer a major blow.
Well, New York and Toronto seem to have quite similar policies. This decision is going to be harder than I thought. What do you say, Katya? Well, Katya says she wants to go to New York because she doesn't like Toronto Mayor Robert Ford. So, we're back for New York!
It appears we've ran out of time for tonight. I'd like to thank our guests, Katie Moranis from Toronto and Robin Silverman from New York. I'd also like to thank our surprise guest, Melanie Zagorchenko from Russia. This is Melanie Greco, wishing you good night.